Have they ever told you that your cholesterol is high and that you need to take a pill for the rest of your life? If you are like the majority of the people who write to me every week, probably yes. And what is worse, you probably left that medical consultation with a prescription in your hand, a feeling of fear in your chest, and no real explanation of what was happening inside your body. Today that changes. My name is Dr. John Lupin, and I have spent years studying how the human body can heal, balance, and protect itself when we give it the correct tools. And what I am going to show you in the next few minutes, you will not find in the office of the majority of doctors, not because it is a mysterious secret, but because the conventional medical system does not have the time or the economic incentive to teach you what your own body already knows how to do. But before getting into the subject, I want you to do something. Think about the last time you received your laboratory results. Remember that exact moment when your eyes went straight to the cholesterol number, that accelerated heartbeat, that small inner voice that asked you if this time the number was too high, that anxiety, that silent worry. That is exactly what the pharmaceutical industry has been using against you for decades, because when you are afraid, you accept the first thing they offer you. And the first thing they offer you is always a statin, a pill that, according to what they explain, is going to reduce that number in your next analysis. And yes, it does reduce it. No one lies to you about that. The problem is in what they do not tell you. What they do not tell you is that that number on the paper is not the true enemy. What they do not tell you is that that pill interferes with the production of an essential molecule that your heart and your muscles need to function correctly. It is called coenzyme Q10, and without it, the cardiac muscle weakens over time. Chronic fatigue settles in your body, and the muscle pains that you thought were from aging actually have a name and a very specific cause. What they do not tell you is that your liver, the same organ that works tirelessly to clean your blood every night while you sleep, suffers under the burden of processing those chemical compounds month after month, year after year. What they do not tell you is that in many independent studies, people with slightly elevated cholesterol after the age of 60 have higher survival rates than those with cholesterol that is too low, a fact that completely contradicts the discourse that has been repeated to us for decades. Now, before you think that I am here to attack doctors, I want to be very clear. There are specific clinical situations in which medications are necessary and save lives, but there is a huge difference between a real cardiac emergency and millions of healthy people with a moderately elevated number on paper to whom medication is prescribed for life without first trying any other alternative. And that difference is precisely the conversation that no one is having with you. So what is the truth that your body needs to hear today? The truth is this: cholesterol by itself does not kill. Cholesterol is a substance that your own liver produces because your body needs it. It needs it to manufacture hormones, to protect the membranes of each of your cells, to produce vitamin D, to sustain the nervous system. If your body produces cholesterol, it is not because it has gone crazy. It is because there is an internal alarm signal that is asking for more of that compound to repair something. The real problem is not the cholesterol that circulates in your blood. The real problem is when that cholesterol becomes oxidized, when it deteriorates, when it becomes sticky and begins to adhere to the walls of your arteries. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not caused by cholesterol alone. It is caused by the low-grade chronic inflammation that is silently destroying the tissues of millions of people over 50 years old around the world. And that inflammation has very concrete causes, it has very concrete solutions, and none of them come in a box of pills. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how that process works inside your body using language that you can understand without needing a university degree. I am going to explain why the most recent science has taken a radical turn in the way of understanding cardiovascular risk. And then the most important thing, I am going to share with you a natural protocol backed by research that you can start applying from today in your kitchen, in your daily routine, without spending a fortune and without depending on any pharmaceutical laboratory. So if you are ready to stop being afraid of your own results and start understanding what your heart really needs, stay. What comes next is the most important information you are going to hear about your health in a long time. I want you for a moment to imagine the inside of a pipe, not a pipe in your house, but an artery, one of those arteries that at this precise moment is transporting blood from your heart to every corner of your body. Now imagine that that pipe on the inside begins to accumulate a layer of sticky and hard material. Little by little, that layer becomes thicker. The space through which the blood passes narrows, the pressure increases, and one day, without warning, that pipe gets clogged. That is exactly what happens in a heart attack. That is exactly what happens in a stroke. And for decades, conventional science pointed to cholesterol as the only one responsible for that process, as if cholesterol were the villain of the story, the criminal that had to be caught and eliminated at any cost. But there is a huge problem with that theory. If cholesterol were the true enemy, then all people with high cholesterol should have clogged arteries, and all people with low cholesterol should have perfect arteries. But that is not what researchers find when they open their eyes and look at the data with honesty. There are people with elevated cholesterol who reach 90 years old with clean arteries, and there are people with perfectly normal cholesterol who die of a heart attack at 55. How is that explained? It is explained because the correct question was never how much cholesterol you have in your blood. The correct question has always been, in what state is that cholesterol? And that distinction changes everything. Allow me to explain this with an image that you are not going to forget easily. Imagine that in your city there is a fire. The firefighters arrive at the scene, do their job, try to control the flames. If someone saw the photos of that fire and said that the firefighters are the ones to blame for the disaster because they were present at the scene, you would say that that person is wrong. No one blames the firefighters for the fire. The firefighters arrived because the fire already existed. Cholesterol is exactly like that. When there is damage to the walls of your arteries, when there is internal inflammation, your body sends cholesterol to that place to repair the damaged tissue. Cholesterol is not clogging your arteries on a whim, it is trying to heal them. The problem occurs when the inflammation is so constant, so persistent, so deep that the body cannot finish that repair work, and the cholesterol that arrives to help in a highly inflamed and oxidized environment begins to deteriorate, begins to oxidize, becomes rigid, sticky, and that is when it really starts to adhere to the arterial walls and to form those plaques that we all fear. So the true criminal of this story is not the cholesterol. The true criminal is the low-grade chronic inflammation that is slowly burning the inside of your blood vessels. And now the question you must ask yourself is this: where does that inflammation come from? It comes from several fronts that the majority of people are completely unaware of. It comes from the excess of refined sugar in the diet that generates constant spikes in blood glucose, and each of those spikes activates an inflammatory response in your body. It comes from highly processed vegetable oils that are present in almost all packaged supermarket products, oils that oxidize easily inside the organism and directly damage cellular membranes. It comes from sedentarism because regular movement is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatories that exists in nature, completely free and available to you at this very moment. It comes from chronic stress that raises cortisol levels for months and years, and that sustained cortisol deteriorates tissues, weakens the arterial wall, and prepares the exact terrain for oxidized cholesterol to do the greatest possible damage. And it also comes from something that almost no one mentions in consultation: the intestine. The health of the intestine is directly connected with the level of inflammation in the whole body. When the intestinal flora is unbalanced, when the intestinal wall is permeabilized, substances that should not enter the bloodstream do so, and the immune system reacts with an inflammatory response that does not stop. Scientists call this low-grade systemic inflammation, and it is one of the most devastating silent epidemics of the 21st century. Now, there is also a marker that laboratories offer, and that the majority of doctors do not routinely ask their patients for. It is called high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. This marker measures exactly the level of internal inflammation in your body, and in many studies, this number predicts cardiovascular risk with much more precision than total cholesterol. However, the conversation continues to revolve around cholesterol because around cholesterol, there is a multi-billion-dollar industry built in the last 4 decades. What you need to understand today, and this is the most important thing of everything I am telling you, is that you have enormous power over that inflammatory process. You do not need to resign yourself to living with chronic inflammation as if it were an inevitable consequence of aging. Inflammation responds and responds quickly. When you give your body the correct nutrients, eliminate the correct aggressors, and activate the natural cleansing mechanisms that have been installed in your biology from the first day of your life. And that is exactly what I am going to show you now. We have reached the heart of everything we have been building together in these last minutes. You already know that cholesterol is not the villain. You already know that chronic inflammation is the true process that damages your arteries. And now comes the part that I am most passionate about sharing, because this is the part where you stop being a passive spectator of your own health and become the protagonist of your recovery. What I am going to present to you is not a fashion diet. It is not a miraculous supplement that disappears from the market in 6 months. It is a protocol built on decades of serious scientific research, applied with common sense, adapted to the reality of a person over 50 years old who wants to live with energy, mental clarity, and a strong heart for many more years. Let us begin with the first pillar, and this is probably the most powerful and most immediate change you can make starting today. Soluble fibers are the first tool, and I want you to understand exactly why they work, because when you understand the mechanism, you stop seeing it as generic advice and start seeing it as a precise biological strategy inside your intestine. Every time you eat, the liver releases bile acids to help digest fats. Those bile acids are made largely of cholesterol. When digestion ends, the body normally reabsorbs those bile acids and recycles them. But when you consume soluble fiber, that fiber acts like a sponge inside the intestine. It traps those bile acids before they can be reabsorbed and carries them directly toward elimination. And what does the liver do when it loses those bile acids? It has to manufacture new ones, and to manufacture them, it needs what? Cholesterol. So the liver takes cholesterol from the blood to replenish what was lost. The result is a real and measurable reduction of LDL cholesterol in the blood without pharmaceutical intervention, simply taking advantage of the natural mechanics of the body. Where do you find this soluble fiber? In whole oats, in chia seeds, in psyllium, in well-prepared legumes, in the apple with skin, in the pear. They are not exotic foods. They are foods that you probably already know and that perhaps you stopped consuming with the frequency your body needs. The second pillar is the reduction of oxidizing aggressors in your diet. Remember that the problem is not cholesterol, but oxidized cholesterol. So if you eliminate the factors that oxidize cholesterol, you eliminate the risk at its root. Refined vegetable oils such as sunflower oil, corn oil, and soybean oil that are present in almost all processed supermarket products oxidize with the heat of the industrial process and then oxidize again inside your body. That process generates inflammatory molecules that directly attack the walls of your arteries. Replacing them with extra virgin olive oil, avocado, good quality butter, or coconut oil for cooking is a change that your cardiovascular system will feel in weeks, not in years. And at the same time that you eliminate those aggressors, you need to incorporate the antioxidants that protect LDL cholesterol from oxidizing inside the bloodstream. The most potent and most accessible of all is natural vitamin E present in walnuts, almonds, unprocessed sunflower seeds, and extra virgin olive oil. The polyphenols in olive oil in particular have a documented capacity to inhibit LDL oxidation that no drug has managed to replicate safely in the long term. The third pillar is the one that surprises people the most and is the one that generates the most initial rejection because it implies a habit change that goes beyond what one eats. It is about managing the glycemic spike. Every time you consume refined carbohydrates, white sugar, white bread, white rice, processed fruit juices, your blood glucose rises quickly and sharply. That spike activates insulin production. And insulin at repeatedly elevated levels stimulates the liver to produce more cholesterol and more triglycerides. It is a direct mechanism. It is not speculation. It is documented in the medical literature with sufficient clarity for any health professional to know it. The strategy is not to eliminate carbohydrates from your life. It is to reorganize them. Eating first the proteins and vegetables on your plate before the carbohydrates reduces the glycemic spike of that same meal by up to 40%, according to recent studies from Cornell University. Adding a healthy fat or fiber at the beginning of the meal slows gastric emptying and softens the glucose curve. Small changes in the order and composition of what you already eat can produce deep metabolic transformations without the need to deprive yourself of anything. And the fourth pillar, often ignored because it seems too simple to be powerful, is movement after meals. Walking between 10 and 20 minutes after your main meal makes the muscles consume the glucose that has just entered the bloodstream, reducing the insulin spike, decreasing the associated inflammation, and activating enzymes that favor lipid cleansing in the blood. You do not need a gym. You do not need to run. A quiet walk at conversation pace is enough to activate that mechanism. And if you do it every day for 30 days, the changes in your next laboratory analyses will speak for themselves. These four pillars are not theory. They are concrete, accessible tools that work in synergy with the biology of your body. When you incorporate soluble fiber, eliminate oxidizing oils, reorganize your carbohydrates, and activate post-meal movement, you are simultaneously attacking excessive cholesterol production, its oxidation, and the inflammation that makes that cholesterol dangerous. That is precisely what no pill can do, because no pill works on those four fronts at the same time. The pill lowers the number. The natural protocol transforms the internal environment where that number is generated. We have traveled an important path together in these minutes. We started talking about a fear that millions of people carry in silence every time they get a blood test. We discovered that that fear has been fed by an incomplete narrative, a narrative that turns cholesterol into the enemy and the pill into the only salvation. Then we understood the biological truth behind real arterial damage, that silent inflammation that works in the shadows while no one names it in the office. And finally, you received 4 concrete tools backed by science to begin transforming your health from the inside out. But now I want to talk to you about something that goes beyond the analyses and the protocols. I want to talk to you about what happens when you decide to take control. There is a very widespread belief among people over 50 years old, a belief that hurts me deeply because I hear it repeated in thousands of consultations and messages. That belief says that at a certain age, the body can no longer improve, that the bad numbers in the laboratory are a definitive sentence, that the best one can do is manage the deterioration, not reverse it, that perfect health was left in the past, and what remains is barely to survive with the least possible amount of symptoms. That is a lie, and science demonstrates it with a clarity that leaves no room for doubt. The human body has a capacity for adaptation and regeneration that continues to surprise even the most experienced researchers. The endothelial cells, which are the inner layer of your arteries, renew themselves continuously. The liver, that extraordinary organ that regulates your lipid profile every night, has a functional recovery capacity that no other organ in the body equals. The intestinal flora, that community of billions of microorganisms that controls a good part of your systemic inflammation, can restructure and improve significantly in just 4 weeks when you give it the correct nutrients. 60 years old is not late. 70 years old is not late. The moment you decide to change is exactly the right moment, but I want to be honest with you because that is what you deserve. This protocol is not magic. I am not going to promise you that in 7 days your analyses will be perfect and your doctor will not understand what happened. What I can tell you with all the solidity of the available evidence is that if you apply these changes consistently for 30 to 60 days, your body will respond. The inflammatory markers will go down, the lipid profile will improve, the energy you thought you had lost forever will begin to return, and most importantly, you will feel the difference before the laboratory confirms it, because the body speaks before the numbers do. Now, how do you maintain this process over time without it becoming an additional burden in your daily life? The answer lies in building small rituals, not big sacrifices. A morning ritual that includes a breakfast with soluble fiber, whether whole oats with chia seeds or a whole fruit with a handful of nuts. You are already activating the cholesterol sweeping mechanism that I explained before. A midday ritual that always begins with proteins and vegetables before carbohydrates is already softening the glycemic curve of the whole day. An afternoon ritual that includes 10 minutes of walking is already reducing systemic inflammation in a measurable way. And a night ritual that eliminates refined oils and ultra-processed products from your table is already protecting the cholesterol that circulates in your blood from oxidizing while you rest. 4 rituals, not 4 sacrifices, 4 small decisions that chain day after day build a cleaner artery, a lighter liver, a stronger heart. And there is something more I want to ask you today, something that goes beyond cholesterol and laboratory analyses. I ask you to change the conversation you have with yourself about your health, to stop seeing yourself as someone who has to defend against aging, and start seeing yourself as someone who is building a stronger version of yourself with every decision you make in the kitchen, on the street, and at the table. Because that internal conversation matters more than any clinical study has managed to measure so far. You got here because something inside you knows that you deserve more than a prescription and a goodbye in 5 minutes. You know that your body deserves to be understood, not just medicated. You know that nature put in food, in movement, and in rest tools that no laboratory has been able to surpass when used with intelligence and consistency. That feeling you have, that certainty, do not ignore it. Act from it. Start today with a single change, just one. It can be the fiber in breakfast. It can be the walk after eating. It can be replacing refined oil with extra virgin olive oil. A single change applied with consistency for 1 week is already the first brick of a completely different cardiovascular health. And when that change is already an automatic habit, add the next one. That is how real transformation works. Not in a day of inspiration, but in weeks of small and sustained decisions. Your heart has been beating nonstop since the first second of your life. It has gone through difficult moments, through long nights, through years of stress, and through decades of a diet that perhaps was not ideal. And yet it keeps beating, it keeps working for you every minute of every day. The least we can do for it is to give it the tools it needs to keep doing it strong, clean, and free for many more years. That is all I want for you.